end, but for the most part, we're going to move relatively fast because it's straightforward. You guys have had this multiple times before. So at the end of the day, obviously, we've got different classifications for body composition. As far as we're talking overall health, figure somewhere between athletic and acceptable. If you're really talking long-term health, you're going to be absolutely fine. Males, I'd say you probably want to be between 10 and 20, and ladies just pretty much add 6 to 10 on that range, and that's pretty much where you're at. We have obviously genetics that are making major influencing factors on obviously where we naturally sit as far as leanness. And so we need to keep in mind some folks, it costs more. And we're going to get into that with the weight management side on the far side. So yes, we've got the average population, and I think this is pretty damn optimistic because you and I, or all of us, has been in public before, and we know those numbers aren't that anymore. But that's how people are. Everyone's got their own body comp. Don't worry about what number of people need to be. More or less, we can just focus on what's the major outcome. So here's some other data on just kind of looking at different athletic teams and what the normal body composition is. This is absolute bullshit. Sorry, sorry, score there. Football linemen, rarely are you going to find those guys in the 15%. It's easy to find them in the 20s, if not in the 30% body fat range. A lot of these numbers are artificially lower. I literally did DEXAs on the basketball team, and I will tell you, allegedly, those numbers are not what they are saying in this table here. The key is, guys, we want to focus on athlete health first. If they're healthy, they're doing well, then from there, we want to figure out, okay, where do they play the best? And if we got a good idea of where they play the best, then we can start making some decisions as far as body composition otherwise. I think a lot of these numbers are unrealistically low for a number of sports. And obviously we've got a number of sports that aren't even listed on here. For example, obviously the one that Tori does. So keep in mind, you need to do this on an athlete by athlete basis. Now, the one thing I do want you to understand is the difference between the different models. Now, the two component model, which is also known as the two compartment model, breaks the body down into two separate compartments. The first compartment is going to be fat mass. The second compartment is everything else, so the fat-free mass. Now, fat mass is also not just what makes you self-conscious at the beach. That's going to be your bone marrow, your nervous system. Lean mass, obviously not just muscle, but it's going to be bone, tendon, most of your internal organs, etc. Now, three component model, now we're adding in bone to the mix. And we go to 4, now we're adding in water. Now, this can be really useful because turns out we do want to have an idea of, okay, how much of you is bone mass? Because that's going to be related to rates of incidences of issues with, obviously potentially having a fracture. This is just a wonderful picture of somebody doing the underwater weighing. It's as miserable as you'd expect. Here's the bod pod when obviously in a photographer's studio, as opposed to in the closet like we have it in Moberly. Here's the relationship between somebody's essentially body size from one day to the next. Turns out it doesn't change that much. And just the reason we do the underwater weighing is good old muscle sinks and fat floats, and based upon your density, we can figure that out. Air displacement pulsosmography allows you to measure the volume you occupy in the space and then get the weight. So it's essentially a less feeling like you're trying to drown yourself version of underwater weighing. If you guys don't want to try underwater weighing, we can set it up. We would do that in the athletic training room, and it requires holding yourself underwater with all of the air outside of your lungs and trying to be stationary. I used to do it as a lab, but it seemed to be kind of a little too cruel and unusual for my students. So I leave it in the back pocket for if I ever have like a especially like negative group of kids come through in class, then I'm going to make them do it. Maybe. So how many of you guys are familiar with the body mass index, also known as the BMI? All right. So Alex, Raquan, Tori, who wants to go ahead and try to explain the basics of it? And then you can then feel free to talk about why it is trash.
I can go ahead and talk about it. So basically, it just takes your body weight and height into account, and it's just a way to check your body composition based on that. However, it's a really poor test to actually see your body composition because it doesn't take muscle mass into consideration. So, for example, like you, Dr. Lane, I'm not sure how much you weigh, but I think based on your BMI, you'd be either considered overweight or obese.
Well, I'm
And
obesity type 1.
well, there you have it. So, and you're clearly not obese. So it doesn't take into consideration like muscle mass during the test. And you can also be overweight, but be classified as normal on the test as well.
Okay, so great points. Now, the origination of the BMI is actually from a British mathematician in the 1800s. And because they didn't have as much computing power, because it's going to be your mass in kilograms over your height in meters squared, he wanted it to be to the 2.5 power, but because it was doing that all in slide rules and by hand, he just took the easy way out and did it by meter squared. So it actually also weighs against people that are tall much more aggressively than people that are shorter. So that's another big issue with BMI. Now, yeah, you get what's known as skinny fat. So you have people that have a normal body weight, but they don't have any lean mass. They pretty much only have fat mass. And then, yes, you get folks like me that carry around, more muscle mass than your average person. And then that also is going to make them seem like they're obese when they're really not. So it's super lazy. When you're dealing with massive numbers of people, then it's going to be a little bit more useful. But if I were you guys, I wouldn't even bother with it. Now, taking waist circumferences or waist to hip ratios, that can be a good method to use because you're going to be able to obviously have some numbers that are pretty easy to take at home, and we can look at how those change over time. So the biggest key when we're going through body comp is to make sure that we're measuring using the same methods over and over again. So we're looking at how the body changes. This is an example of how bioelectrical impedance, specifically, analysis, BIA, that's how it's going to be set. Now this will be going from the arm to the leg. Densitometry, that's the underwater weighing stuff that we talked about earlier. Skin fold calipers, you guys have heard about or used in previous classes, along with the DEXA. CT scans and MRIs can also be used to measure body comp when they're really good. The key is CT scans use a lot of radiation, and MRIs are just really expensive. Air displacement plethysmography, that obviously is going to be our wonderful bod pod, and multi-component models literally means we're going to use more than one at the same time. Now, the reason bioelectrical impedance works is because when we put a certain amount of current through a solution, we're going to get a certain amount of resistance, meaning obviously how easily the electricity went through. The lower the resistance, the faster the current went through it. And so when we add oil, so hence someone who's got a higher body fat, it's going to take longer for that current to go through them. Now, for skin fold calipers, here's a number of typical locations for different approaches. This would be for the 3 site for a female of going with our tricep, supra, iliac, and thigh. And all this should be on the right side of the body. So that's wrong and that's wrong because science. Here we have the 3 site for men, which can be chest, ab, thigh. There's also going to be a 4 site alteration where we actually have bicep, tricep, subscap, and then suprailiac. Now, what we have here is essentially body fat that you would effectively expect someone to have given a certain age and X amount of skin fold thicknesses in different areas. Here's that wonderful BMI chart that it's not good. If you can't see the person, you're not able to interact with them, it can be potentially useful, but otherwise I wouldn't bother. When we're talking about girths, this would be that waist to hip ratio. And then here's an example of actually someone taking a measurement of a skin fold. And then obviously, like Alex brought up earlier, there's a difference between being 195 pounds lean and 195 pounds of not so lean. So the key is we just want to find a method that we can have someone do frequently or frequently enough that we're going to be able to measure and see appreciable changes. So if you're really good with calipers, you can use calipers. If you're good at using girths, you can use girths. And then the camera in the mirror doesn't lie. So if you've got wonderful progress pictures, you can see how you look and see how your body changes, then congratulations, you'll have that information and you can see obviously if a diet is or isn't working. So this is just essentially the slope that you're going to be using and the intercepts whenever we're talking about body density and trying to figure out effectively what would be overall the expected body density that would then correlate to certain body fat. But the key is, once again, we want to have something that's going to be consistent and then allow us to track someone for long periods of time. So what we have here, guys, is a number of different research studies where they talk about using multiple methods and effectively what we're trying to get from them as far as getting information. So notice in these studies, we're talking about BIA and skin folds, which naturally have their issues when it comes to measuring people's body composition. So because of low accuracy and low precision, meaning we're going to have inter-rater reliability and intra-rater reliability when it comes to the skin fold caliper. And BIA, because of hydration and changes along those lines, we can have a lot of things go weird there. DEXA and BOD and underwater weighing have pretty high accuracy, but low precision, meaning we can literally scan someone, take them off the machine, scan them again, and we're going to not have the exact same number. Okay, so not as bad as our skin folds, but we still have our issues. Now, dilution through deuterium, now we're talking about doing some hardcore chemical effects. We're going to be very precise, but we're not going to be very consistent. So AKA we're off the real bullseye of the individual. But our best bet is to use a 4-compartment model. So what we're doing is we're actually going to DEXA them, we're going to BOD them, we're going to BIA them as well, or BIS. Bioelectrical spectroscopy is the nicer version of bioelectrical impedance, where you use multiple wavelengths of electricity. And what's interesting is electricity travels faster through your extracellular fluid than as it does your intracellular fluid, and obviously more so than does your fat. So when you use that method, you can actually extrapolate intra and extracellular fluid levels along with body comp. So our goal now, just to kind of put together how we're going to track in these methods, is a simple question that you guys are going to work on in groups that you guys can see here. So effectively, what body comp tests would you want to use, okay, while you're trying to be as efficient with time and money if you have to do an entire football team in an hour, meaning over 50 athletes, an entire basketball team. So we're talking about 12 to maybe 15 athletes. And then you're going to be tracking 4 athletes as they're coming back through from having to have some type of surgical intervention. So I want you guys to effectively give what would be your top 3 methods you would want them to go ahead and use, as along with how frequently would you want them to test. Does that make sense before we send you into your first group activity?
Yes.
Rock and roll. So this one shouldn't be too terribly painful. Talk amongst yourselves, be realistic. And if you look up how long each of these scans take, so it'll give you some information on how you're going to do it. So it's 6:15 now, plan on coming back at about 6:20. So the rooms are open. Whenever you're ready, go ahead, hop on in there. Group 1, you're going to be the entire football team in 1 hour. Group 2 is going to be the basketball team in 1 hour. And group 4, you're going to be working with those athletes that are recovering from surgery. So go ahead and give it some go. Curtis, please join your group whenever you have a moment. If you're having issues, please let me know. All right, folks. So now that we're getting everybody back into the room,
$6,000 all the way to, I don't know.
you guys can finish up your conversation if you want.
Oh no, we were just looking at how much a Tanita costs.
Yeah, they're relatively inexpensive. All right, when you're ready, guys. All right, Chris's group with basketball, good choice. Bod Pod's going to probably take about 5 minutes each, so it's going to be really tight to do that in a full hour. But Skinfold and BIA is absolutely possible. Good job, John. Now keep in mind, with the Skinfold, if you've got a Skinfold, we'll figure 50 odd guys, you've got 3 different sites. You definitely got to make sure you know what you're doing, and you probably don't have enough time to do a second measurement. So having multiple methods is a good way to go about it as well, guys. Good work. Good. Now, Abby, with your group, and I understand that you're keeping in mind the prices, and I think you did a great job with not going too high. That's where a DEXA and maybe that MRI, because then you can look at the lean mass and fat mass specifically in the injured parts of the body and compare it to the non-injured limb. So if they had ACL surgery, you could actually look at the size of the quads and the hamstrings and all the other muscles in the thigh compared to obviously the non-injured side. And then we can actually figure out, okay, when is the muscular girths getting back to about the same size they were pre-injury? So no, that's good. Anybody have any questions over what you guys did there before we move on to chatting about good old chapter 14 and we really start talking about some weight management? Yeah, John and Chris, or I guess John, how often would you guys want to test since you guys didn't cover that?
That's one thing we necessarily didn't discuss yet. Would you do that would you do that every 2 weeks, week and a half, maybe?
Oh, for body comp, honestly, for athletes.
Oh, my bad. Yeah.
No, it's okay. It's okay. For the body compositional testing, guys, figure our rule of thumb, and we're going into weight management, so this is something we're going to touch on anyways, which is we should do it as frequently as we make appreciable change. Meaning, if you've got an athlete, you're trying to get them to put on 10 pounds or lose 10 pounds. Well, once we've lost 5 or gained 5, maybe we should test to figure out what those 5 pounds were. Or we can think of it like we're going to do it once a quarter if we're really caring about, because if you have a college athlete, you only have them for 4 years. So since you have them for 4 years, you want to make sure you're making the progress you want. So checking each quarter to make sure that we're moving in the direction we want absolutely can be useful. If they're already the body size, muscularity, everything else you want, and it doesn't look like they made changes, their scale weight hasn't changed, the way they look hasn't changed, then we don't really need to test. Let's just kind of let them live their lives. Now, if we're having an athlete where they got to go from being 240 to 300 pounds to get in big enough shape or be big enough for their position, like, okay, that's a different story. Now we've really got to go ahead and, put some weight on them. So let's make sure that the pounds we're putting on are the types that they can flex more so than the types that jiggle. So, when in doubt, guys, you want to schedule it as frequently as we're seeing either significant changes or we just want to do a check-in. So like for myself, I haven't had my body comp ran in probably over a year now, just because it hasn't really changed that much. I should probably have it done just so I can see where I'm at, but it's not going to give me any information that's really useful because my weight hasn't changed that much. I haven't lost a lot of weight or gained a lot of weight. So good work there. Any other questions before we start going into weight management?
I had a question too. So like it'd be typical like to lose around a pound a week, I guess.
Well, now you're kind of skipping ahead, which is absolutely fine with me. We want to think about you are trying to lose effectively about 0.5% of your body weight a week to maybe a full percent of your body weight a week as just kind of like a starter. Let's not go too crazy. So 1 pound, if you're a 100-pound female, which I don't know why you're a 100-pound female, and you're trying to lose a pound, that seems a little, or you're trying to lose weight. I mean, if you're very short, I could see that maybe being something you want to do. But for the most part, I don't see that being a really good decision. So we just want to make sure we're not trying to cut weight too quickly. Because like we've talked about with the changing your resting metabolic rate, thermic effect, food, and exercise, as you get lighter, things get harder, and we don't want to make things even more drastic for people than they need to be. So figure, like I said, less than 1% a week. So that's why if you're working with a 400-pound person, taking 4 pounds off them a week, it's not going to be, still going to be work and it still require effort, but I'm not as concerned. But we still want to do this in a sustainable way that's going to be something that's going to, you know, hopefully make them feel better and healthy about themselves. So now I have a link here that you guys can see, and it is some of the coolest graphs I've ever seen, which means a lot of you guys are gonna be like, this is stupid. But no, it's actually, it's really cool because it gives you essentially extrapolating how much weight or how your weight's gonna change if we go within specific parameters. So in the chat, guys, we want somebody that we're gonna have them trying to lose weight. So give me a body weight. Anybody? First come, what's the number thrown in? 235. Trying to lose weight, Alex. Good Lord. I want somebody that needs to go and lose some weight. Okay, male or female? All right. Age. And how tall? And since that weight, we want to make sure they're definitely under 6 feet because, yeah, 235 at 7 feet tall is actually probably a little underweight. So something less than 6 feet. Brent, you're just all on the chat. I don't know where everybody else is hiding, but you guys can feel free to hop in. So we're going to say, actually, let's go ahead. Let's switch to expert mode. Okay. What do we want her goal weight to be? Somebody other than, okay, sounds good. We're going to go down to 184. I like how we're not divisible by 5 there, Haley. Okay, we're going to reach that goal in 180 days. That's pretty effing drastic, but we'll give it a shot. We're going to say that we're going to, how much we're going to change that physical activity for, or how much we're going to change it by. 80%? We're just going to say no. Ooh, 50%. Dang. Okay, now once we're into maintenance, how much more are we going to do as far as physical activity once we're in maintenance so we get to the weight we want to be? Sounds good. Okay, let's go with a longer one if we can. Do a 500-day simulation. Boom. All right. So based upon the initial numbers that we gave this lady, okay, and actually with her estimate, notice that physical activity at work or school, what do we want to put her at? All right. Physical activity at leisure time. Stayed the same. Nice. Okay. So notice, in order to maintain the weight, we assume it's going to be about 2,920. So that's using the Harris-Benedict equation, then putting in the extra physical activity. To reach that goal, we got to drop those calories by over 1,000. That is not pleasant. So we can make that weight loss goal. Okay. And then once we lose that weight, then we're going to obviously have a lower total amount of calories in. But notice we did say we're going to be working out more both during and after we get done with that diet. So with the understanding that we're going to work out that much more, we can actually see how graphically it's expecting over X amount of days how much weight loss we're going to have until we get to the goal weight. And then once we hit our goal weight, we're probably going to come up and we're going to try to maintain this new weight for the long haul with a actual, that given dietary intake. Now, that's the blue line, the dark blue line. What do you think the light blue shaded area stands for, guys?
I'd say it's like the probability.
That's actually the standard of error is probably the best way to describe it. That's going to be the air variance around it. Because remember, some folks have a faster metabolism, we suspect, and some of them have a lower. Yup. Thanks to genetic. Plus, we're going to be a little off with our estimations of the calorie intake and the physical activity. We're just trying to make assumptions. So notice in the low end, this lady might only get down to $1.95 at the end of all that, not cutting her calories by 1,000 off its initial. And then with that maintenance, actually gain weight and be back up to 207, even though she's still working out way more than she was before. Or there's the other possibility where she'll actually lose way more weight than expected. And then when we think that she's on maintenance, she's going to keep hemorrhaging weight. And yes, that is due to genetics. And that's why we have those natural air variants. Now let's take the same numbers and say, I ain't doing extra exercise at all. F that noise. Now look at how few calories that person's going to be getting in. Because remember, that's extra exercise on top of what they're already doing. So you're literally halving the calories to lose that weight initially. So you can see the link. Obviously, it's over in the PowerPoint slides, so you guys can see that information for yourself. But I really think it's a useful way that you can visualize how we're going to get these changes over time. And how once we get done, then we're in the maintenance phase. And the maintenance phase never ends. You literally are going to be eating like that for pretty much the rest of your life if you're trying to maintain that physique. So it's a challenge. So what I've got here is a picture from, you can actually just Google this if you want. It's just some of the athletes from, I think this is mostly athletes from the 90s of, obviously, you got your bodybuilders, but you've got different, these are high level competitive athletes. We can have our comments about the choices of underwear that people are making, but like anything else, the body weight and composition is going to be pretty variable in a lot of different sports. So we just want to match the athlete with their sport. Now, do any of you guys know who this gentleman on the far right or this lady on the far right is? So, oh man, the problem is you don't know your history, Curtis. That's Cheryl Hainsworth, and that is Shane Hammond. This guy was over a 500-pound clean and jerk athlete and 900-pound squatter. And Cheryl was one of the last women to medal well in Olympic lifting for the U.S. And I think she snatched just under 300 pounds. No, I think it was like 280. Yeah. So obviously standing next to the bodybuilder in this superimposed picture, not as impressive, but that dude could wreck frickin' shop with weights. Obviously this gentleman was a discus player. This was a professional basketball player, long distance runner, wrestler, another distance runner, more middle distance, professional baseball player and shot putter, cyclist. This lady threw the hammer. This lady was a high jumper, bodybuilder. Gosh, I can't remember. This is another Olympic lifter. I can't remember her name. Distance runner, basketball player, and that was a figure skater. But notice, guys, you got a wide variety of how the body can present. Like anything else, when you're trying to specialize and be the best athlete you can be, I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to oil yourself up and take pictures of yourselves, folks, but the body comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. The goal is, like anything else, we want to try to match it up and make sure people are going to be healthy and be safe. And yes, the 500-pound gorilla in the room that people don't like to talk about is just straight up genetics. Genetics are going to be a major confounding factor as to our ability to both increase our body mass and decrease our body mass. So some folks are going to make far greater progress. Notice these twins, some are going to lose a lot more weight. Some are going to lose nowhere near as much, thanks to genetics. When it comes to gaining weight, some are going to gain way more than you expect. Some aren't going to gain much at all, thanks again to genetics. And at this point in your life, you probably got a good idea of how your genetics are serving or not serving you. And like anything else, we're going to try to use the information we have with our athletes, what we know about them, what they potentially know about their parents, as to, okay, how much real change can we expect to see from these people that we're going to be able to do in a healthy manner and be sustainable. So we've obviously talked before about just good old energy balance. It's going to be one of the major drivers of your ability to effectively maintain your weight. And then macronutrients are going to be the next one after we know about simply, are you in a caloric surplus or otherwise? So what we have here is going to be people that were limited to how many calories they could take, were free living, and then effectively had different variations amount of exercise, and then how much fat that they would in turn have in their diet. So see how when we have the weight of the food in general, and then we have the total energy intake. When you're eating food that happens to be naturally higher in fat, it tends to be more calorically dense, which makes it a lot easier to take in more calories. It's not like this is a bad thing or a good thing. It's just simply an effect. So if our goal is to get our athletes to obviously maintain their body weight or lose their body weight, we can always use an approach which is referred to sometimes as volumetrics, which is simply eating more food that happens to be lower in calories. So if we're trying to be as like calorically dense as we can, then we'll just do shot glasses full of olive oil. But if you want to eat a lot of food that has very little calories, then just line up the celery and go to town. There is calories in celery, just not a lot of them, and there's a lot of fiber and a lot of water. So you can have people pretty much gorge themselves on celery all day, and they're not going to gain weight. Kind of back to when we talked about the Dan John diet earlier on in the semester. Now, there's a lot of things in turn that are going to be helping us regulate our appetite. So it's not just, are you hungry, but it's, can you smell food around you? Are you do you like the taste of the food? You know, a little bit with nutrients. That's why we really like salt, sweet, and fatty. Then we've got the psychological side of just remembering that it's time to eat. We're so conditioned to think about 3 meals a day because that's how a lot of us were raised. And then obviously, how many social situations can you guys think of? Obviously, we're in a pandemic, so we haven't had a lot of them that don't have food as a major component of them. So like major holidays where you don't sit down and effectively eat a lot. Bingo. And then obviously some of us are more stress eaters. We're going to learn in a bit the relationship between exercise and caloric intake, which is really interesting. And then outside of that, remember we have a number of different hormones being released by our GI that in turn is going to be signaling for us to eat more or less, and along with our nervous control of it, along with we're going to have leptin and adiponectin, those hormones we talked about earlier, that are also giving us signals for hunger and satiety. So now here's what's really interesting. You're going to find that if you are physically active, you do a really good job of regulating your energy intake and also maintaining your body weight. So individuals that, we can see how we kind of have this J-shaped relationship. Once you go from low to moderate to high to very high physical activity levels, you tend to do a pretty good job of maintaining your body weight. It's when we happen to have very low to low physical activity levels, that's where this gets dysregulated. So we no longer have that like, I'm full, I don't need to eat anymore, signals going to our body, because it turns out we don't have that type of feedback that we're trying to effectively keep ourselves in a little bit more balance. It's not perfect, but it is going to help when it comes to obviously caloric balance. So a way to think about this is if you know people are sedentary, they're naturally going to be a lot hungrier than you'd actually expect, given they're not being very physical activity. And what's actually crazy, when you get to like very, very high, like insanely high physical activity levels, this actually becomes dysregulated again, and people tend to not take as many calories because they're just exhausted from moving so much. And I can give you there's some interesting research that Stefan Pasiakos and his group have come up with that was really, really fascinating. Now, another thing to keep in mind is you can see the difference effectively between the constrained and the additive model of energy expenditure. So that when we add physical activity to our resting metabolic rate and everything else, it just goes on top. It doesn't actually work like that. As the physical activity keeps coming up and up, we're going to start to have a little bit of that suppression of a resting metabolic rate. And we're probably going to have a much lower that NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So we're not going to have as great of an overall caloric consuming level that we would think that we'd be at. So any questions here when it comes to effects of exercise on our appetite and, caloric balance? Or more
Yeah,
body.
Dr. Lane, I have a question. So, is it ghrelin's the hormone that basically tells you that you're hungry, right?
One of the, yes.
Is there like a genetic component of like if someone releases more ghrelin than others?
A little bit, just like it's actually leptin and adiponectin. Those are the ones that get wild. Give me a moment. I don't want to be switching between tabs because I do have grades up in another one. All right, guys. So, ghrelin a little bit, and that's going to be also helping with just digestive enzymes. But the mouse on the left has no signaling ability for leptin. The mouse on the right does. So literally the mouse on the left is effectively perpetually hungry. So when it comes to these hormones, we need to understand that, yes, if you are going to feel ravenous at all times, how well do you think you're going to do maintaining and adhering to a diet for long periods of time? So we do need to understand that, yes, you will be hungry at some point on a diet, but how hungry you are, that shouldn't be something that's just catastrophic and ruining your life. Now we're getting into relationships with food and a lot of other things that can be pretty tricky pretty fast if we're not careful. But like anything else, that's why we're going to have conversations with the people we're working with, treating them like human beings, and also understanding, you know, it costs more for some people than others to try to have like major changes in their body composition and their body weight. And at what point is the cost that you're paying just not worth their price anymore? So that is your question though, Alex, on kind of the hormonal influence there.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. There's actually examples of humans that don't have it, and they're just huge. They're 300 plus pound people because they're literally always hungry. Like, I know all of you guys have been hungry before. Can only imagine what it was like if you just perpetually felt like that. So, hence, the amount of physical activity that we're going through and the actual total amount of energy we're expending each day tends to correlate. But remember, when we're really starting to be physically active, okay, now we're going to have a suppression of the non-exercise activity thermogenesis because the body doesn't want to move outside of that training we're doing. Along with, we can obviously have maybe a slight suppression of your resting metabolic rate if you're really doing some crazy things. It seems to happen more in like really high volume aerobic style training. It's probably not going to happen to most normal people you're working with, but it is something to keep in mind as a potential another monkey wrench in the work. And like anything else, so I just want to track and have some simple ways to follow the weight and the body comp and see if it's changing the way we want. Okay. There's a lot of weight loss management, or weight loss methods. Key is whatever gets people in a deficit, that's what you need to do. Some of these are a lot dumber than others. Way dumber than others. So energy restriction is the first key. Now, obviously, we're not looking to do a massive restriction. We're just trying to restrict them enough that we're getting into the deficits. Prader-Willi syndrome is a genetic abnormality that I can't remember if it's either it's a paternal genetic error or a maternal genetic error. Been a long time since I've ever heard about that one.
I
And
think
that is part of it, is there is that dysregulation in the signaling there.
I think it's mostly paternal, but I think it can be maternal.
Yeah. But
I just didn't know. Like, it was when Alex was asking about the. Well, I forgot what his question was, but it kind of reminded me of that.
yeah, the hormonal regulation. No, it's a thing. It's a thing. Then you have very low energy diets. You guys maybe heard about like the HCG diet. It was popular for a bit. It was a crash diet. It was like 500 calories a day. And go figure, people lost weight because you're starving. It's really easy to lose weight when you're starving. But it's as far as, can we maintain this? Is this sustainable? Is this something that we're going to be able to keep going for the rest of our lives? And that's where a lot of people, they can't stay on the wagon that long. Low fat diets are a potential way to go ahead, obviously, to lose some weight for folks that prefer to go more higher carb and protein, because you typically get a greater volume of food there. And if that's what works for them, by all means, give it some go. Food combining diets is straight up stupid. It's the idea that by eating this food with this food, you will not lose weight. And that's not how that works whatsoever. It's once again a caloric balance. High protein diets, because protein tends to have a pretty good satiety factor, along with it's a little bit higher on the thermic effect food. And it turns out, you don't really store excess protein as fat. You just burn through it in one way or another. The zone diet, which was a popularization of effectively trying to do like 1/3 protein, 1/3 carbs, 1/3 fats. It's just another way to structure your diet around certain macronutrients. Then we've got low carb diets, so whatever. And some folks that actually works well for, because that's what's going to be able to put them into some type of essentially lower calorie intake, because they're not doing as many carbs. Maybe they've got a bit of an issue with doing a lot of sweets otherwise. So if you kind of get rid of that, you're gonna be good to go. Manipulation of energy density, that's where we talked about effectively doing like vegetable pasta instead of pasta. So you're doing foods that have very little calories, but give you a lot of food to eat. And in fact, you can kind of see the energy density to the energy intake idea over here. So if you happen to have, denser foods, you tend to take in more calories each day. And then when it comes to calcium, it is useful for muscular contraction, bone health, and a little bit for metabolism. But the dairy products and otherwise, excluding dairy, isn't necessarily going to be a way that's going to help you lose weight so much as it's important to get yourself in that deficit. Non-nutritive sweeteners, well, just a way to cut calories again by, instead of doing Coca-Cola, they're doing Diet Coke. Sorry for the product placement. That's not necessarily something that's going to be that useful, but it's a way to cut things out. And then you've got more recent things like the ketogenic diet, the vegan diet, the carnivore diet, or the paleo diet. Any of those diets work as long as we're in a deficit. And then there's also intermittent fasting. And obviously, and if it fits your macros, and there's nothing wrong with, if you find the method works for you, do it. But the key is you have to find the method that works for you in a sustainable way that doesn't make you a son of a gun to be around. You need to have that diet that you can still go about the activities of your daily living and be effectively, or have that meaningful, enjoyable life, and not just be a shut-in that's hating life and doesn't want to talk to anybody. Questions, comments, concerns there? Okay. So when it comes to our exercise for weight loss, whatever's going to put us in a deficit, we don't have to necessarily do this type of exercise or that type of exercise. The more important thing is we find what they like. We're going to give an intensity high enough and long enough that we're going to burn the calories we're looking for, because there's three ways to get into a deficit. One is we decrease our caloric intake, maintain everything else. Two, we maintain our caloric intake and increase our exercise. Three, a combination of 1 and 2. That's it. So if you find the method that someone really enjoys, it could be hiking, could be biking, could be swimming, could be lifting weights, whatever's going to get them to burn calories and put them in the deficit, let it ride. You don't need to get fancy. You just need to get them doing something. Now, as far as decreased resting metabolic rate with weight loss, this is the thing that's really brutal with people that do yo-yo dieting. So we can see the lighter blue is the change in body mass. The darker blue is the change in our resting energy expenditure. Okay. Notice with about a 10% loss in body weight, you have about a 6% decrease in your overall resting or your energy expenditure. So as we lose weight, we're going to be effectively losing or burning less calories. Whereas notice on the flip side, when you tend to increase your body mass, your actual energy expenditure tends to follow it relatively lockstep. So that means we're going to have to keep eating more and more to keep ourselves pushing forward. But the losing weight, we're going to have to get even more aggressive with effectively trying to drop because of the disparity between the two. Now, weight cycling is obviously the period of having your body weight go up, maintaining your body weight and having it go down. This is really useful in people that are bodybuilders or other folks that are obviously training in a specific way because they want to accrue a greater amount of body mass. Because the further you go in training, you're going to find the harder it is to effectively still be able to keep gaining that muscle mass or to keep losing that fat mass and maintaining your muscle mass. So if you're doing weight cycling as a means to obviously attain your goals, it's a really useful approach for it. Meaning, let's say you wanted to mass up, try to gain muscle mass, lean mass for 2 to 3 months. From there, you're going to hold that new body weight for a good 1 to 3 months to resensitize your tissues. From there, you could mass again, or you could go and try to do a bit of a cutting phase for that 1 to 3 months. The reason as we go, the first month, we're going to have the greatest change, and the second month is going to be less. And that third month, we're starting to hit that plateau. So that's why typically, unless you're using drugs or something, we want to think about probably running a bulk or a cut for at least a solid month or two to kind of get something out of it. But we don't want to be doing that, especially an aggressive bulk or an aggressive cut, for more than probably 2 or 3 months at a time, just because it's really hard to sustain. And so the reason we want to stay is we want to effectively try to resensitize our tissues. So whenever we come back and try to do that training again to get the changes we're looking for, we're going to be able to get those to occur. And it's not going to be, or we're going to be again where we can hit that initial major change. So that's the reason why we want to go ahead and both have the change in the body weight and then maintain. Now, a lot of folks instead are going to think about weight cycling like yo-yo dieting. Like someone loses a lot of weight and then balloons back up and goes beyond and then loses weight again and then balloons back up beyond their previous. That is obviously not the most healthy of practice, but if it works, and meaning one of the times they do it, they stay down there and the body weight doesn't come back up, that is in effect a better long-term thing for their health than if they wouldn't have done it before. So yo-yo dieting isn't great, but if you're going to get somebody to be the body weight that's going to be a much healthier and they have the quality of life and performance they're looking for, then by all means, don't be afraid to go ahead and try to go ahead and do so. Any questions on weight cycling though? Does that make sense to you guys? There's Norbert getting a drink in the background. I wonder what that noise is. And Tink's trying to play with him. He is not interested in paying attention to that. Okay, so why do you think there's gender differences in weight loss, guys? Why do you guys think there's gender differences in weight loss?
Well, is it one factor that guys have more testosterone and muscle mass?
I don't know, man. I've seen a lot of emo dudes walking around campus and a lot of yoked women, so I don't know. That is definitely part of it. The size difference is probably going to be the major culprit there. Okay, so, and this is not meant to be an indictment, okay? And this is coming from a very, very heteronormative perspective, so please understand there's major caveats there. Are any of you gentlemen, no, that's not fair because then somebody, okay, think of it this way, guys. How often do you see, and this is a guy and a girl, so like I said, very hetero, cisgender approach. Do you see a couple walking around where the guy is markedly smaller than the girl. If you guys had to give a percentage to that, how frequently do you see it? And obviously I'm talking about through body weight here. Okay. I'm gonna hit stop and record because I'm about to get personal, and if you guys don't, okay. So hormonal differences is part of it. Testosterone does make it a lot easier to put on muscle mass than obviously the amounts that your average female has compared to your average male. But a big component of this, guys, is gonna be sheer size difference. Like literally, you know, my sister and I, if you guys ever get a chance to meet her, we look a lot alike, like a lot alike. It's a little bit bad for my sister sometimes. But because the major difference between the two of us is literally, I got the Y chromosome from dad, she got the X chromosome from dad. So I stand over half a foot taller than she does, as well as I'm obviously markedly bigger and more muscular than she is. Now, don't get me wrong. My little sis, when she lifted weights on the regular, she could, yeah, she was easily squatting 225 for reps. Like she's strong. She's actually a better natural athlete than I am. Way better natural athlete than I am. But I had the testosterone advantage. So once I hit puberty, I finally caught up to her and could actually beat her at a lot of things. But until then, for that, she beat me in a foot race any day of the week, which really sucked because she's my younger sister. Now, when it comes to weight loss, what are some other oppositions that your average female has compared to your average male?
I read in the book that fat is usually typically used in the visceral region first, and that men typically have more fat in the visceral region than other regions typically. So could that be a factor?
So we're still going down with hormonal effects and otherwise. And so when we say visceral area, the thing that I like to use, and it's definitely not the classiest statement, is I refer to it as the American pregnancy. So like when you guys have seen guys that it's like all their body fat is literally just like right in their, sorry, I'm not that tall with the camera. It's pretty much right in their stomach. Like they just have the beer belly and then it's seemingly nowhere else in their body. That is thanks to the hormonal differences in how we deposit body fat, where obviously with women, it tends to be a lot more hips and thighs, but we still have genetic variability. Like you guys see people walking around campus, the way one person carries their body fat is very different than the way another person carries their body fat, even though they're the same gender. So estrogen is going to be one of those major reasons why we carry more of that body comp in the hips and thighs. So absolutely, John. The other component is it tends to also lead to much more easy accrual of body fat, as probably every lady in here discovered whenever they hit puberty. And then actually, just because I find it to be interesting, and I think more guys need to realize it, how many of you ladies have got a friend that whenever they used like birth control, and I'm referring to like obviously oral birth control, gosh, the piece of plastic that gets shoved under the skin or any of the other stuff there, that your friend, whenever they try to use birth control, they gain like over 10 pounds in a month. Yep. Yeah. Also because it caused issues with mood disorders and otherwise. Hey, do you guys know that you guys know what the rate of blood clots are from the Johnson and Johnson vaccine is from COVID? Do you know what the rate of birth control? Yes, blood clotting risk is? It's about 1 in 1,000. In case you're wondering how people suck. But, you know, that's another real potential issue. And obviously using birth control is giving you super physiological amounts of these hormones because it's effectively trying to mimic pregnancy. And that's, you know, that's another thing that's going to make it, it can make it very difficult for some ladies to lose weight. And then we can get into things like thyroid dysfunction, otherwise that are also going to throw things really out the window really fast for people. And that's beyond the scope here, other than if you're trying these things, you're running everything correctly, the person seems to have good adherence, yet they're not losing weight or hitting any of the goals that you guys have both agreed on. It's time to go get a full blood panel done. It's time to get their numbers looked at to make sure that obviously, you know, they're effectively within healthy ranges. So, any questions on gender differences for weight loss? Aside from the fact that I awkwardly made some of you guys tell me stories about the people you date. And by some of you, I mean pretty much none of you guys, because I guess we don't like to talk. So let's talk about getting practical here. If we're trying to get our athletes to lose weight, what is hands down the dumbest damn time to tell your athlete to lose weight?
In season.
Absolutely. What is going to be the second pretty damn dumb time to tell your athlete to lose weight? Oh no, postseason and off season, it's on. That's when it's easy to go ahead and lose that. Preseason. When we're getting into that major volume, okay? It sounds dumb, guys. Why do we take in calories? And you guys can unmute yourself to go ahead and say what you guys think the answer is.
For energy.
Yes, I read Brent's post too. Why? What's the use of that energy?
To do all the things we like to do.
Yeah, to do all the things you, and yes, I like how you don't have to send it to me privately. You can send it in the group there. Haley was survive. Yeah, and to sustain life. Okay. Now, when we're in season or we're preseason and we're not taking enough calories, and we're also talking about the micronutrients and everything else, what do we immediately become at risk for doing? It's a lot of stress on the body in general if you're playing a sport and you're doing all that repetitive actions that can be obviously pretty damaging to your tissues. The question I have, Chris, is what's the major issue with being in a deficit when we're in season? So effectively, what's the problem with not getting enough calories?
You're not gonna have enough energy to actually perform well.
And yes,
Or recovery.
Nathan, bingo, and Chris, we're not going to be repairing the damage we're doing. And so if we're not repairing the damage we're doing, congratulations. Now we're going to go ahead and throw ourselves even further down than we're looking for. So if we're really looking for weight loss, that's an off-season thing to do. That's something to do before the athlete comes. Oh God, yeah. The female athlete triad is just, unfortunately, it's a real thing. And I mean, then again, unfortunately, thanks to body dysmorphia, there seemingly is now more guys that are coming down with anorexia nervosa than before. So gender equality. But the goal is, sorry. The goal is we're not trying to do any of this stuff to our athletes. We're trying to make them be the best athlete they can be with, at least in my mind, making sure that they're going to be then healthy, happy people when they're done being my athlete. Because, Tori, what year are you now?
A senior?
So this is your final season?
Yeah.
So how many more games do you get to pitch as a collegiate softball player?
I think we have about 3 more series left, plus
2 more midweek series and then the tournament. And then depending on that, if we go to the NCAA one.
Cool. Now, are you interested in playing professionally once you get done here?
No.
What do you want to do after you get done here?
PT school. I'll go back home to Canada.
Damn straight. Go back to your cheaper books. No, I'm kidding. Now, with the reason I'm using Tori as an example is, okay, so you're going back to Canada. What's the average lifespan for a female in Canada?
I'm not sure. Like pretty late. Like with no average lifespan.
Yeah.
Like they live pretty long, like for first world.
Okay. Can we give a number to that?
80. I don't know.
Okay, let's go with 80 years. And you're what, 22?
Yeah.
So we've got a grand total of 58 more years of life. And probably, I don't know, we'll say 15 more games of pitching in softball.
Yeah.
So I think, which would we prioritize more? How you're going to live the next 58 years or how you're going to pitch for 15 more games?
I'm hoping the years.
As am I, for all of you guys. I'm just using Tori as an example here because when we're looking at strategies for our athletes, we need to think about what's the strategy that they can apply now and that they're going to be able to then take information from and use for the rest of their life. So yeah, when we start taking insane drops in calorie intake and otherwise, we're running the risk of the female athlete triad. You do enough cardiac scarring, you do some real hard damage to your body, you might not come back. Meaning, it's not so much that you, unfortunately, anorexia nervosa actually has the highest lethality rate of all mental illnesses, which is a wild thing to say when you think about other mental illnesses. Now, we want to make sure that we're creating good relationships and we're trying to make obviously feasible and attainable goals. So if you've got a coach that says, I'll pick on, actually, that's the thing is a lot of you guys haven't seen each other. So, okay, but I'm going to pick on him. Alex, do you mind just telling us your height and weight? And you can throw it in the chat.
I'm 5'7" and I weigh 145.
All right. So Alex 5'7", 145. I am now going to be a not good or intelligent football coach and decide that I want Alex to be my nose guard. How much should I make Alex weigh? Raquan left. Huh? Can't pick on him anymore because he definitely was a college football player. But we're going to say Alex needs to weigh 280 pounds. Now, I'm an irrational, maybe have some issues psychologically and otherwise football coach, and I want Alex to gain that, be up to 280 pounds. How long should I give him? That just sounds incredibly stupid and unhealthy. Oh, nice, Nathan. I like it. 1 year. That's straight up Fruit Loops. So, Alex, I need you to gain about 3 pounds every day for the next year.
Pass.
No. I am telling you what you need to do. So you need to somehow figure out a way to shove an extra 10,000 calories in that mouth of yours on top of your normal diet. Now, when I say something that irrational, what immediately do you have alarm bells going off in your minds, guys? What immediately comes to mind other than poor Alex, and he really is talking about someone that is like psychologically unhinged? Like this, hopefully this person does not exist. This is a completely fictitious example. Yeah, diabetes. How do you think his cardiovascular system is going to like pumping what's going to be straight up Crisco and other oils because he needs to have all of those calories going through them? You know, how hard is that going to be on all of his tissues to all of a sudden change that much fundamentally that quickly? So that's why I like the percentage of body size. And then, we get in differences like frames, like how broad are somebody's shoulders. That's more anthropometrics, which is interesting, but still a difficult thing to really fully understand. But if, let's say, okay, Tori, I'm going to pick on you again, because obviously I've known you for every year since you came here. How much taller have you gotten since you got to college?
I haven't.
Go figure, but you've been taller than me the entire time, so that's consistent. Now, how many pounds approximately have you changed since you came to college?
Probably 15 pounds, 15 to 20 pounds.
Which is 4 years of, well, COVID, but effectively 4 years of consistent resistance training, of obviously being on a different diet, on a different level of play than you were before. Now, 15 pounds in 4 years, that's not bad, guys. It's just 4 pounds a year. Does that sound relatively feasible and not something insane?
Yeah.
And let's face it, Tori, when you came here, you were definitely an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah, I was a twig.
Yeah, which is, that's fine. That's people develop. But if I said that Tori needed to gain that 100 pounds over those 4 years, do you think you could have done that on your frame?
No.
Not with that attitude. You're
And I
talking.
wouldn't be able to throw a very good pitch, I don't think, anymore.
Yeah, you might have to kind of lean to get some of your side out of the way, and we'll leave
Yeah.
it at that. But that's why when we're working with these athletes, okay, what's feasible based upon their size, their frame, and the framework of time we have. So if we can put 5, maybe 10 pounds of good tissue on an athlete over the course of a year, that's a great year. That's a very productive year. But if we think we're going to gain 20 pounds, this is an actual thing that did happen. Not the current basketball coach at EKU, but the previous, the guy who got canned for being so bad. I literally remember him getting in the face of one of the previous strength coaches we had about how he had this forward on the basketball team. And I think I've told you guys the story before, where have I told you about how much weight he wanted this basketball player to gain before season started?
No.
He wanted him to gain 20 pounds before season started. Guess when he told the strength coach, mind you, the season starts beginning of November. Guess when he told the strength coach that he needed to gain the 20 pounds? Worse. Yep. Effing October. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. If I told you the difference between your family members living and dying is you gaining 20 pounds in a month, I'm sure you guys could potentially do that. But this is a Division I center on the basketball team who's going to get a lot of minutes, who's obviously going through all of that in-season practice volume and the training that comes on top of that and everything else. I don't even care if you gave me gallons of olive oil and a funnel. I don't know how we're going to put the calories in a kid like that at a rate fast enough to put all that weight on them. But that's the type of irrational things you can run into. So hence, you just got to be a voice of reason on both sides, because you're going to have the college or the high school guy that wants to gain and, look like a pro bodybuilder. And it's like, you don't put on muscle that fast, bud. So, and Alex, you and I had this conversation of the diminishing return. So like the lean gain, kind of real slow weight gain, where you typically tend to get mostly only lean mass. But then as we start talking about gaining 2-3 pounds a week, initially the amount of fat gain we're going to have is minimum. But then as we're going into faster rates of weight gain, we're getting a lot more fat mass with it, which isn't a problem if you're already starting with an incredibly lean athlete and they just need to get freaking bigger for their role. That lineman example. But if we're talking about most other athletes where we do want some more lean mass just because it's going to be more useful for their sport, yeah, we want to gain that, but we don't want to gain that at the rate at which we're gaining fat mass, where our power weight ratio isn't improving and our performance isn't really gaining much from all those changes. So just a 0.5% to 1% a week, just kind of let them roll. So as far as some of the wonderful mistakes we can have, well, turns out we can go too fast on both sides of the coin. We can obviously not do a good job of setting up that diet in a way. We can do massive meals, which is going to be a lot harder to gain weight. If you're really trying to gain weight, splitting it over multiple meals per day tends to be better. Making weight and rapid weight loss strategies, that is going to be water manipulation, which is dehydration. Low carb for the week of, kind of, we talked about the glycogen is one way to manipulate it. The others is just steam rooms, saunas, and otherwise as ways to lose weight. That's really rough. I've done it many times in my life. I wouldn't suggest you guys do it. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can always talk to me, but I don't want to record that and obviously put that up. those are in-person conversations because I don't want people to be messing up. And then once again, with our weight gain, what's in a respectable amount that we can put on per week? How do we want to structure it so that it's going to be something that we can maintain over the long haul? And then of course, you know, making sure that we're gaining the type of weight that we're looking for. Hence why using body composition to check in on occasion. So we can see, okay, are we on the right path or are we going off the rails? Because the sooner we figure out if we're on the right path, then we're going to stay the course. But if we're really hemorrhaging lean mass when we're trying to lose weight and that wasn't the goal, okay, we need to reassess, we need to reset everything up and come back to it. Or the flip side could be true, where we're trying to, you know, gain a lot of weight and it's mostly fat mass. Like, okay, when you slow down this weight gain, we need to rethink the program. So we're going to be able to gain the lean mass we're looking for, which also going to hopefully give us a performance gain. So we had some previous examples here from classes of, I'm going to have you take that individual athlete using the formula that I showed you guys at the beginning of the class. So actually, just give me a moment. I'm going to grab that wonderful link. But I want you guys to go ahead and give me effectively in the chat, I want you guys to put up 3 separate athletes, okay? And the goal will be to effectively massively change their body weight in 1 year. Okay, so we've got, who is Des Linden?
The first American woman to win the Boston Marathon in like decades. She ran the year that they swam it basically in 2018.
Okay, so Des Linden, we're going to say put 100 pounds of her on 100 pounds onto her in 1 year. Okay. We're going to go with Gronkowski, and we're going to say lose 100 pounds. And then who's Blake Griffin, Trey?
I forgot you're not big on basketball. He plays for the Nets. He played for Oklahoma. He's a forward.
Is that the guy that punched Justin Bieber once?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Got
Sounds
like
good.
red hair, light skinned guy.
Okay. Okay. So sounds good. Let's go with those 3. So group 1 is going to have, oh, that's funny. I literally just put the link and everything in the chat only towards Haley. My bad. Let's put that up for all you guys. Okay. So it will be to effectively put 100 pounds on Des Linden and Blake Griffin, and then take 100 pounds off of Gronkowski. And so group 1 is Linden. Group 2 is going to be Gronkowski. And then group 3 is going to be Blake, oh my gosh, Griffin. So you're going to have to look up how old these people are, how much they weigh currently, or just kind of get an idea for their current weight. Obviously, it might not be perfect. And then from there, you're gonna have to figure out, okay, what's their typical physical activity level, given obviously what they do for a living and otherwise, and what type of calorie intake they may have to do to lose that weight or to gain that weight initially. What's going to be their calories they're going to need to maintain it once they get there, and then how big of a variance are we going to have? So like, we're trying to get them from this weight to this weight, but they might instead get to here or here on the other sides. And then over the long term, you know, when they're trying to maintain the weight, how big of a separation do we get as we go forward? So it's 7:24 now. I'm gonna give you guys till about 7:35 to go through it, and then we're gonna talk through what you guys came up with. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, since I'm once again talking to myself, let's go ahead. The rooms are all open. You guys have fun, and I will see you guys back in a few minutes. But yeah, thank you, Chris, for bringing up Desiree Linden, because yeah, this is notice that's one of the shots from her running the 2018 Boston. God, that looks miserable. Their feet had to be straight up burger.
Some couple thousand people were pulled off the course with hypothermia. It's like the craziest year there ever was.
Oh my God, that's man, just doing anything long distance in wet feet is just oh boy. But dear God, yeah, her times and everything. That's that's insane. But great job, group 2, with your guys' breakdown. If you guys don't mind putting that in chat one more time, because the other groups probably can't see what you guys came up with. But yeah, where you'd have to have Gronkowski eating close to half of his normal calorie intake for a year, and he'd be $165, which does not sound like a good weight for a guy that height, but knows the air variance of 186 to 143 pounds. Okay, now for Nathan's. Damn. That's some aggressive weight gain, because we talked about how you get that more of that commensurate increase in caloric needs as you get bigger. So, holy crap. And then whenever you guys are ready, go ahead and drop in the Des Linden data that you guys came up with. Now, while they're doing that, the one thing that I would like to talk about is, how many of you guys have heard people use the term set point before? Nope, I had the right one the first one. Okay. Some folks will argue that you have a set point that your body weight wants to be at. Instead, all that point happens to be is the collision point of your normal caloric intake and your normal physical activity levels. So if I just every day ate an extra 1,000 calories and I kept doing the amount of physical activity or my normal calories out, I would get bigger over time until eventually I got big enough, thanks to the increases in my resting metabolic rate and increases in my non-activity thermogenesis with all the activity I'm doing, that I would just stabilize at a new body weight. So it's not so much we have a set point as we have very set patterns we tend to follow. And when we follow them for long enough periods of time, we tend to just end up at exactly the body sizes that we all happen to be at. Literally, everyone listening to this now and in the future, you are exactly the weight you are because of every single calorie you've eaten in your entire life to this point, and every calorie you've burned to this point. If you literally somehow attract every single calorie in and out for the entire time, it would get you to this exact body weight. Mind you, hydration is another component, but not that big of one compared to the total calories in. Okay, so group 1, are you guys still having some issues?
Yeah, when we were calculating it, it said that like we had an error. It didn't let her get up to a certain weight, so we had to try to like split it up in 2 different segments.
Interesting. Yeah, because I looked her up and she's what, like 5'1"?
Yeah, and she's 97 pounds.
Yeah, just wow. That is an efficient human being. And yes, I could understand how the calculator would be like, why are you trying to make a 5 foot tall woman be over 200 pounds? That doesn't sound like a smart thing. Well, I wonder if it's sexist. If you put in the sex as male, then they'd be like, yeah, go for it, bro. You got this. But yeah, you're still talking about, and I think you guys are probably not even getting her initial calorie needs correct, because the amount of physical activity your average marathoner is doing as far as training with a volume, gosh, I mean, she might have a weekly running volume of easily over, 80, 90 miles. Oh, nice job. Nice job. Yeah. Chris, what would you guess her weekly volume is, or mileage is?
I would think you're pretty much right on 80 to 90.
Yeah.
There are like it's rare to hear about the 120 milers or 110 milers. That doesn't usually last long, and she's been performing well for a long time. She just set a 50K record. But yeah, she's awesome. It was less than 3 hours, so that's always exciting.
Jesus, that's good for her. That is quite impressive. You guys, any other questions about effectively how we're going to use body composition? So we're going to be able to see how well we're doing with our weight management and body changes over time. Anything else you guys would like me to go ahead and touch on tonight before we call it an evening?
Would you be able to explain like some of our paper stuff that's coming up, like just like the formatting and what you would like to see in it?
Oh, you mean the your project?
Yeah, project.
Yeah, give me 1 second. So effectively, the summary is pretty straightforward. It's just, summarize what you guys have come across and what you guys are doing, all that jazz. Okay. Trey, you're unmuted, bud. Thank you. So I want you guys to think about making sure that you're obviously going to be giving us that, 4-day averages over 2 separate blocks of time. Okay, that's not great. Okay, so here's some previous stuff I put together just so folks could see examples of, just ways that you can format it to make it easy, where you can obviously have the food. So notice this is garbage fire. So this is eating out of straight up fast food. And then how each of those are going to come across. So we've got not just calories, protein, carbs, and I just have fibers, another part of carbs, fat, and then overall the iron and vitamin C. So that was my vitamin and mineral. And then from here, so this would be like effectively throughout the entire day. So you'd have the totals then, because if notice we got the servings. So then here is just the multiplying that by the number of servings so we can figure out what would be the total and then the actual calories for the day. So this is if I had nothing but the sad things that I typically have in my office and how I put in calories just kind of as another example for a given day, but obviously we're looking for more than that. Then you can have like an actual, like truly across the days of what you're doing, and I'm missing part. Oh, that's kind of cool. But so then like the total, so this would be like the total calorie intake for day 1. And you can see how that goes. You'd need to have the comparison graphs. That's the big thing that a lot of people miss out, is they don't keep in mind all the different graphs they're going to need to do. And then we've got the same thing with obviously with carbohydrates. And I haven't made then the graphs that you're going to need to make for the other ones. But this, literally guys, just go copy, paste. And now I've made the fats graph. That's it. And just need to make sure that I've got each of those for the comparisons. Now this is just the calories out. So this would be the tracking for the other days as far as what's being eaten. I hope you guys can read that on what's on my screen.
Dr. Lane, for the calories out, are we just kind of, for example, like let's say we go and do resistance training. Do we just use that table that we saw like a few chapters ago as a reference?
Yeah. I mean, for the calories out, so there should actually be calories in. So if I wanted to, so let's go and just think. So we would have effectively day, and so we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. So then I'd have my resting metabolic rate / really we're talking the basal metabolic rate. So you've done those calculations, right? Okay. Now from there, I would then put in my, say, aerobic exercise. So I would probably just take my step tracker, figure out how far it said I walked that day in miles, and then resistance train. And that way, so let's say I've got 1890 for my basal metabolic rate. Okay, well, aerobic exercise on a normal day, I usually walk somewhere around like 8 or so miles. So figure I'm just going to be lazy with it and say that's going to be, I will say 800 calories worth of walking. And then I've got my resistance training where I usually lift weights, what I like to think is hard, for about an hour. And we're going to say that burns like an additional, I don't know, we'll say 350 calories. So then we would just have one that would be total over here. And that is literally just going to be equal to the sum of these guys. And so since this shouldn't really change too much, but like I went, it was kind of a, it was as much as I normally hike on the weekends. So I only did like 12 miles on, or like 13 miles on Sunday. So that I would say is only going to, it's going to be like 1200. And then I didn't lift weights at all. And then let's say today I barely moved around, but I did like really heavy lower body training. So then I would have this to go across. Let's say tomorrow I am not doing a damn thing. I'm just going to sit in bed and eat my feelings. Okay. So I've got my total. Let me go out. Okay. So now if I go to my totals, I can literally just copy this, or I can just use formulas to go from one to the other. So that's calories in. So we're just going to go ahead and paste you over here. Total out. Notice how it's trying to go off other ones. So we have to go paste values. Okay. So then calorie balance is simply going to be equal to calories in minus calories out. So if I go ahead and pull that across for all the days, I actually had one day where I was in surplus, 2 days where I was in major deficits, and then one day where I was in a slight deficit. And that's also obviously what you're going to be putting in and making sure you're organizing your data in a way that you can see it. So if I were you guys, I would just take the tables and then obviously put them into your Word document, and same thing with your graphs. And when in doubt, you can attach both the Word document and then the Excel document, but try to make sure that it's organized in a way that a sober person can try to make some sense of what the heck is going on. Does that help, Tori?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you wanted it fully like Word or Excel or both, or how you wanted it.
Yeah, the summary obviously in Word. The graphs and everything else, you can just do all that in Excel. You don't have to necessarily put them together, but the cleaner you make it, the easier you make it for me to grade, which means it's just easier for me to grade. But if I can't find things, then that makes it hard to give you the grade for it. Yes.
Sorry, how long do you want like the summary to be? I don't know.
Usually it's about 2 pages, 2 to 3 pages. I just want you to think through the different questions in the summary and just kind of do your best to answer them fully.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
Dr. Lane, I realized I think I got the presentation in this class a little bit confused early on with the presentation in the other class. So I just wanted to ask before next week, kind of your expectations for Alex and me. Like, are we submitting a completed presentation with it recorded, or do we have our slides and we do it for 3 minutes during the class?
Awesome question, Chris. Since actually there's 3 of you guys, but the other student doesn't really ever show up to the lectures. So if they're listening to this now, you can just submit your recorded slides for, the presentation side, either directly to me or through the Blackboard link. If you can't find the Blackboard link, just submit it directly to me. I don't know. The timing on those things can sometimes be weird. I'm not sure if I said it correctly for you guys. But otherwise, if you guys feel up for it, the idea is to kind of do your 3-minute spiel for the class, in class. Because next week, we're just going to talk briefly about nutrigenomics and the microbiome. I would suggest all of you guys listen to the lecture from this past fall that was a guest lecture on the microbiome by Gabrielle Fundero, she did a way better job than I ever will of it. But it could be pretty useful, or it's just good information that obviously we're going to also have on your guys' final. So does that give you guys some good marching orders of what we're looking for?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys.
I do have one more. And so then to present at class, will we share our screen or should we email our slide or slides to you ahead of time?
I'll have it so you guys, we can share your screen. But I will be recording the slides. So keep in mind, if you have tabs or otherwise that you are not proud of, make sure all those things are closed before you hit share, because it'll be recorded.
Words of wisdom. Thank you.
Oh, because we all have found examples of people that made some Zoom fails to that. Gosh, was that poor girl that forgot to turn off her camera whenever she went in the bathroom? So, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, guys. Well, stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you guys again, obviously next week for our final lecture, and then you guys just got your exams, so we will review at the end of the lecture next week. So, have a great one. I'll talk to you guys more later. Bye bye.